right, there we are. Okay, nope, too far. That's what happens when you push the button too many times. Okay. So
that's Christine.
The Turlock area, and I farm with my brother. We're a pretty small operation, but this is going to let you know how even a small operation can make this happen. As you know, last December, we got a substantial amount of rain, and we received enough to actually cause some local flooding, especially in the last week of December. We farm right along one of the canals of the Turlock irrigation system. So if something's going to be going on in that canal, I'm going to see it. So on January 3rd, there we go. I saw this coming down the canal. At this time of year, normally there is nothing in the canal because they are doing basic maintenance, right? And I'm like, I want a piece of that. If that's going out to the ocean, I'm pretty sure of that because nobody's watering anything right now. And so I thought, if I can just open my gate, maybe I can do some on-ground recharge. So I emailed the water district manager, and she got back to me. And she told me about a LunchMAR pilot program that they were doing with sustainable conservation. And she sort of got me set up with Rogel Rogers and Wes Miller, FTID. So let me give you a little background. At this point, I had just come through the drought. I was thinking it wasn't going to rain at all. My trees were stressed. I had been dealing with really like metering out that water, and we're in a water-rich area, but we still had been cut back quite a bit. And I had been forced to supplement with groundwater. And then my neighbor, who is
crazy,
her well had gone dry, and it started to make me think, this is hitting really close to home, and is my well next, right? Because I live right there too. And we had already started sucking sand on one of our wells as well. So if I had an opportunity to recharge right in my area to benefit my neighbor and myself, well, I was going to do it. And TID helped make that happen. So on January 3rd, I saw that, made the phone calls and the emails, and TID, within that period of a week, they had come in and set up the telemetry, and Sustainable Conservation had taken the soil samples. And by January 12th, I was opening my gate and I was starting to flood. So from being on the almond board, I had been following the research that we had been doing on flooding dormant almonds. So I knew that there would probably be likely no detrimental effects to the trees themselves from the flooding. So I wasn't really too worried about that. In fact, one of the things I really was interested in, because I had accumulated salts in those soils during the drought, I was really interested in the leaching fraction that was possible and would actually help my soils. And I knew my soils, being sandy loam, were a perfect candidate. And from the way that we actually had the orchard leveled and the permanent levees and the layout, so there really couldn't be any spillage off of the property, I knew we were like a perfect candidate. And so it was like, ready, set, go. And let's see, we'll go to the next one. And the other thing, we had finished all of our winter sanitation work. So I didn't have to get into the orchard at any point after that until bloom. So I knew that we weren't going to have to deal with that. So over the next week, we flooded approximately 40 acres, 3 different times. And it still continued to rain over that entire period. And every time it went back into the ground. Within 12 waters, all that flood water had gone down. So we applied approximately 44 acre feet, which is about 14.5 inches. And oddly, and this is really odd, we actually didn't lose any trees, which is kind of a miracle because, I mean, we had some very violent and windy storms come through. So I feel very lucky because I did know that that was a serious risk. These were, 20 acres of that was very old and big trees. But for whatever reason, I got lucky. Sometimes I think, like, is it just because there was so much water on there that there was so much weight? I don't know. That's something to be looked at in the future. So there are a lot of upsides. Like I said before, the salts. We were able to push down the salts, and we could see that in the soil samples and in the pH as well when we looked at the befores and the afters. I had cover crop going on, and they really probably did help with the percolation, and man, did they grow that year. In fact, they were taller than me at one point in the spring. It is an excellent means of gopher control if you have good dogs. And I don't know if my dogs were really happy, and I saved a lot of money on dog food for those 3 weeks. I don't know. You can see one of them is being very patient and hunting in the background. And then in the foreground, that dog, if you can tell, those are 2 little feet and a tail sticking out of his mouth. I know that's kind of gruesome, but just think about circle of life. This is no different than having a very active owl box on your property, okay? And I find it to be a very natural means of rodent control, because they are one of the problems that you can have when you do cover crops. And I also think there was probably some benefit to our navel orangeworm control, which is a big pest, because we do orchard sanitation and we're knocking those nuts to the ground, but they're still in the nut on the ground. But if you can get them to rot, then you're actually preventing them from coming out. So all that water over and over again probably helped them in that rotting process. And because we have a gravity-fed system, we did not have to pay for pumping. So that was one of the benefits to us, but that is not the case with everyone. But I was very thankful that we didn't have any out-of-pocket costs. Now, there are a couple downsides. Kind of around the clock monitoring, slogging around in the rain, a lot of wet boots, throwing things in the dryer, going back out again, and all times, of the day and night. So you can't really leave. And we don't have any employees, so that all fell on to us. I also learned we have very old flood infrastructure on our farm. It's probably 100 years old. It's a very old farm. And I definitely need to spend some money on the maintenance of it if it's going to be used this much. It was fine for the winter, but that is something that I'm really going to have to invest in the future. I did have an introduction of a new weed because of one particular batch of water that came, and it came running off of somewhere into the canal, or maybe from actually the storm runoff from the city. I have a lot of knotweed now, but I managed to get it under control without herbicides, so that was good. But it was definitely there, and it wasn't there before. Another problem you could have is if you needed access to the field, you're not going to be able to go in. So get all your work done early to be prepared. And of course, as I mentioned, the potential to lose trees, that's always an issue. So, if you want to do this in the winter and you want to be a good, conscientious almond farmer and do your orchard sanitation, you have to bust your hump in the fall to get all your work done so that come December, you are ready to go and not have to worry about like, oh, I still have to do this. Oh, hey, I still have to do that. No, you need to get it all done. But it's kind of nice to know that you got the work done. I'll admit that. Would I do it again? Yes. Every single time. I would do it again and again. Because the truth is, I'm happy to do the work. But in the future, I recognize it will not be something that is necessarily, easy to schedule, right? Because that's the one thing we can't predict. We can't predict the weather. And when it's going to come and when it's not going to come. So planning is going to be difficult, and it's going to require flexibility, and it's going to require a lot of thinking ahead. And sometimes that will be like, oh, it didn't happen this year and I did all that work. But other times it's, you're going to have the opportunity to say to yourself like, oh, I made a difference, right? So in the end, my neighbor's well did go up so she could use it, but she really still needs to fix it because it's really old. And we did not see a huge change in my own wells, but they're deeper and they're probably in a different strata. And so we might not necessarily see that. And plus, I mean, I was the only one doing it in my area. So I'm just a drop. But I think in the future, we're going to have a lot more drops. And that's where, we're going to make a big difference. I think initially my neighbors saw me and they were probably like, this lady's crazy. It's raining and it hasn't stopped raining. And she's already flooded her property 3 times. What's going on here? However, when the California Secretary of Ag and Natural Resource come to your farm, and then it makes it into the local media and, in the newspapers and on TV, it starts to change opinions. And all of a sudden people are like, what did you do? How did you get in that program? I want to do that. And it's like, well, here's the information. Let's see what we can make happen next year. So it's really great to see that there's an attitude shift. 8 years ago, when you talked to somebody about groundwater and pumping and Sigma, there was a lot of anger and a lot of this is anything that's under my property is mine and mine to pump. And it's a little bit different now. It's more, we are all connected by these aquifers. So we need to do work together to keep them healthy for all. Because I think people are beginning to realize that we are not alone in this, right? And we can't work on this singly or work against it singly. So farms are aware this is going to happen, right? And it's a sort of change that does not happen overnight. We all know that, right? Especially, anything with government also never happens overnight. But we are definitely getting ready and we're headed in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christine. Yeah. I know.
Oh, here I am.
We are going to invite Mark up to the stage if you're ready, Mark. And we are going to hear from Mark and then Julia. Then we'll go into our snack and coffee break, and then we'll have time for some questions. I will show you how to use it. We've got this. Green is forward.
Green is forward?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Red is back. Well, thank you for having me. I really like to talk about recharge. We'll get right into it. FloodMAR, on-firm recharge, is basically we're reclaiming the floodplains. You can hear me? Okay. This is a picture of the East Side Bypass, the Fresno River at Road 9 in Madera County. The Fresno River is the chocolate one. That's the amount of water that's coming through there at one time. And the chocolate water is why we can't use our micro irrigation systems through filters. They will plug up in about 2 seconds. Where do I point this at, Amy? Next slide, guys. Oh, this happened in 2017, 2019, and 2023. So it happens, kind of regular, but we never know when it's going to happen. Can you guys run the video on this? This is a picture of how fast this water is running. It also has Carl, but that's about 6,000 CFS. I think it took out the bridge this year, didn't it, Sarah? Yeah. Okay, next slide. You can hit the video on this. This is a picture of 1997. I'm an old geezer, so I can show you the picture. This is when the San Joaquin River broke its banks. And this is looking from the bypass to the east There's flooded farm ground. There's a car over there by the.
There's a car.
The amount of water was tremendous. You guys go to the next slide. Next slide. Oh, just to show you where I'm at, if I can do this. Okay, I'm there at Chowchilla, Madeira. The X is my, the star is my farm. And the circle is where the flood was that year. And there's a little X there for the east side bypass. Can you guys run this slide and turn the sound up? Back on step, I want to listen. That's those trees that were flooded in that 97 picture. Okay, you can turn the sound down. And it's the water coming up from the ground. So there's a lot of air displacement, which is probably why these trees did not die. And the water was over there for like a month and a half because they couldn't fix the levee for a long time. So part of the studies with how long trees can last in this situation depends on how much water is coming up from the ground too. Next slide. Oh, that's why I took out walnut trees on 40 acres last in 22. The cost to take that out was $40,000. The grant money available is zero. NRCS has a little bit of a program, but it's really it's a big waste. I did whole orchard recycling. That grant from Air District was 25.5, and I spent 25.5, and I got a grant for 24, so it was pretty fair. I mean, okay. Why do I do whole orchard recycling? Well, this is a picture up in Tulare County. I mean, near Turlock. And this is a guy preparing a field without whole orchard recycling. You know, regional water guys would have got him. This is a field that had whole orchard recycling in 2017 when there was a lot of water and there was no runoff and the water just went straight into the ground. So with that improved organic matter, the water goes straight down. So this is what I have. I have a blank canvas, and farming's 50% science and 50% art. Please remember that. That's what they taught me at Cal Poly, and I think they taught at UC Davis. It's never 100% science, guys. There's too many variables. So ripping was part of the whole recycling. My grandson's picking up hardpan and wood was free, but they quit on me when it got hot, so I had to bring some people in. That's part of poultry recycling. Leveling I got from the NRCS equip grant, so that was break even. Pipelines. There was a pipeline sometime in the 60s here, but it was never used. I've been there for 30 years. It's never been used. So we had to put a new pipeline in to get ready for recharge. This is pretty expensive. So really, right now I'm out $61,000 on that 40-acre piece with the grant money subtracted out. And the big part of that is that removal of trees. And Christine and I were talking about, you know, I'd be love to pull out those trees if I get a grant for it. And I'd be willing not to farm it for a couple, 3 years. Because I don't have that expense I have to recoup using highest and best use of my farm to try to make money and be sustainable as a farmer. So the outlay of money is done without knowing when the next excess water yield will occur. And this, in our area, we don't have credits or incentives available for groundwater storage. Unexpected happens all the time in farming. You never know. This is a slide from Rick Iger, Provost and Pritchard. I circled the one about the pond area. I don't like the word pond. I don't like the word basin. More like wet feet type of thing. We're going for the shallow aquifer, which is above the cork and clay in my area. And that gives you a good example of how deep a recharge area needs to be, or even less. When I was recharging, top of my boots got wet, not my ankles. Border up, plant the barley, add a little cover crop on the side. It's kind of a waste of time to do cover crop, really, when you're doing recharge, because I have so much organic matter in the field right now. And right next door, I have a walnut orchard with cover crop. It's like, I would like to plant it with barley and make some money. And when I sprayed the barley, it died anyways. So that's recharging the barley. This is recharging the walnuts. It was interesting to hear about the walnut concerns. I do have walnuts and I did recharge on it and I left it on there for about 4 days before I switched sets. So I kept switching sets. You have to remember, we don't irrigate the whole field all at once. The capacity of the system won't take it. So you can run checks or sets and move it around. So it's rare in my area that we do the whole field at once. So from January 20th, January, I did 20 acre feet, in February, 35 acre feet in my recharge area. They charged me $10 an acre foot. That was affordable. I could do that. In March, they shut down the district pipeline for repairs. This is a cool picture. This is a well on my almond field. And this is taking November. And that's air going into the ground because the water is being pumped out. So kind of like Boris and Natasha, in goes the bad air, out goes the good. So you guys are probably too young for that. But this is January. Air's coming out. So the shallow aquifer is like a lung. We can actually put water in and take it out, and it's sustainable that we can do this with the water. This is my grandson's barley, harvesting the barley. Barley, what it looks like in the summertime. They were charging $10 an acre foot for that recharged water in January, February. In June, they were charging $97 an acre foot. But I went to water district meeting and said, can you give it to us for free if we have a recharge area? And they did for the month of July. So this is what it looks like. And people worry about evaporation, but really, I think the trash keeps the evaporation to a minimum. They shut me down in August. So I quit recharging when the water was $97 an acre foot. Just can't do it, or even 55. I just can't do it. I'm not making enough money. SAGB map. I'm not a fan. My recharge area is moderately poor. That's the area. The poor recharge is to the west. Good recharge is to the east. And the best recharge is to the far east. And the old timers used to say, don't break the hard band. Water goes to China. And you know what? Those guys were right. It just goes right down to China. So when I was on those 5 checks of barley, I could sleep at night, Christine. I didn't have to get up once. I knew it was not going out anywhere. But when I was on the west side, I was up all the time. It was like, better go check it, better go check it. Oh, shoot, you know. But I loved going back to the east. When I rotated back to the east, it was, yes. Oh, I did have some wildlife issues. That's some walnut trees I did not take out because I had a guest. And she had 4 eggs in the nest, and I think we had 3, what do you call them, fledglings come out. So LunchMAR, it's great for wintertime, but as the season progresses, like Christina said, we have to start doing stuff. So designated recharge areas can keep working. So if we find a good spot like I found, the footprint can be small, and I'm probably not going to use fertilizer or chemicals on it. So just I could still be recharging on that piece. To me, grants sometimes confuse us because they want wildlife areas, they want cover crops. Please, 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 let us concentrate on recharge. If we have a recharge area, we get comfortable with it as a management practice. Guess what my kids, or maybe even me, grumpy as I am, will do with that? I will probably make it into a wildlife area with hedge rows and all the other stuff people want, because I know what it's going to be used for now. And it's not going to improve my practice. I can have the buffer zones that they need for the hedgerows. So I don't kill the little critters that might be in them, like geese. Oh, and those, when I took those walnut trees down this year, they moved over to another tree in the walnuts that I still have. So they're still there. We had a bunch of fledglings there too. Okay, this is ag math. I'm sorry to the engineers out there. Assuming almonds, and I'm using 3 acre feet per year to pump. Okay. In 2022, I took the trees out, so I didn't pump anything. I had an in lieu recharge of 120 acre feet. In 2023, I recharged 100, what does that say? 150, 130. I could have recharged another 170 if I had free water or low cost water. I didn't use my deep well in 2023. So that's another in lieu recharge for 120. Next year, we got pretty good salt water storage. We're anticipating a full allotment next year. That's another 120 feet of in lieu recharge, which means I'm not pumping water. So that is up to about 5 years of water. Okay, that's ag math. I know engineers might not like it, but so what do we need to do? What's the ask? Funds to remove existing trees. Fund the NRCS or the Air Board. Air Board has staff. NRCS has staff. Water districts have staff. GSAs don't have staff, but water districts do. Funds for pipelines, pumps, return systems. NRCS has it, but as you can see from the picture, I was still out quite a bit of money for that flood line, and that flood line was there basically for recharge. Let's see. Funds to improve the water. Intake of recharge areas, ripping, boring. I don't think it's gonna do as well this next year because I've dissed it a few times. If I ripped it again, that costs money. Boring costs money. You know, everything's costing the farmer money. You heard what Aaron said about the cost of water. Let me go back. Streamline the payment process from time frame, and a yearly payment for designated recharge areas. If I leave, let's say 5 acres out, there's no money coming in for that. My wife questions me about my wisdom of leaving 5 acres. So we are, by leaving it out, we lose our appraisal value of our farm, our resale value of our farm, income of our farm, it all goes down. And lower cost of water delivered to the districts. The districts charge us water because they're being charged for water. How do we lower the water costs in the district so we have less to do? This last slide. What does recharge do? It can slow or stop subsidence, improves water quality, brings in wildlife, improves groundwater levels, increases groundwater storage, and saltwater intrusion doesn't apply in my area. So the 6 cents of sigma right there. Questions?
Thank you, Mark.
Hey, how did that work out?
We could hear it well.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, I think those were excellent talks. Thanks, Maddie, for your thumbs up, and Wendy. We started our forum conversation with those talks from Christine and Mark, and I think it really helps to set the stage and provide some visual context as to what is it actually like to conduct on-farm recharge? What does it look like out there on the field? What are some of the challenges that folks have to navigate on a daily basis? And so I'm just curious, if you weren't able to join us in person, this was your first time seeing this, reactions, inspirations, comments, feedback.
Turn your cameras on too.
Yeah. And we have actually, Mark is joining us today. So if we have any questions for Mark from his on-farm recharge experience, Mark can take a couple of questions. We didn't know if he was going to be able to jump in or not today. Isn't that great presentations? Hi, Rochelle.
Hi there. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. I just like to say, Megan, that one of the key, I guess one of the keys to getting the farmers involved in the Madera Chowchilla areas recharge network that we've developed in large collaboration with local farmers over the past year is kind of gathering with the local farmers and sorting out who amongst them, tends to be more leader, have more leader-like qualities that want to speak to crowds or audiences I find a lot of farmers kind of tend to shy away from speaking to larger groups, but there are those that do like to speak. So what I did was to work with those particular farmers as the basis for farming a recharge network in the Madera Chowchilla area, and kind of springboarded from that working collaboration to invite more farmers into workshops where we can share farmer to farmer what their lessons learned, challenges learned, and how to engage in on-farm recharge successfully.
I love that. I think we've heard from a number of folks throughout this year, actually, as efforts have kind of, I think, ramped up a little bit to try to engage more farmers in this dialogue and in the network activities, that it's important to go to where the farmers are and start to establish those networks and those trusted connections. And for me, that was a big takeaway just from Christine's presentation, where she was even experiencing some distrust from her next door neighbor as to, what are you doing with this recharge business? It seems very unusual. And then once, she was able to prove the, return on investment, then, her trust, her circle of trust expanded and made it easier to have those conversations. So I think this exchange of real world application and being very real about, this is new-ish, the concepts are new-ish, and we've got some things to work out, and we're probably going to find new things to work through every single year because the space is so dynamic. That keeps it real, and I really like that.
I'd like to repeat your question, Megan, to the group here today. It takes a lot for a grower to come speak about what they're doing, what they're learning, what they're trying out, and the risks they're taking. And from Mark and from Christine, one of the things we've talked a lot about is bringing a grower to the network, which does not have a lot of farmers in it. It's not like the grower recharge network that Rogel has been working with. I'm curious what those of you that are maybe in research or doing policy work or doing other kinds of work, what's the value for you of us bringing farmers in to talk about their experience? Because I think as a network, we need to think about, how often do we bring farmers to the network, and how often do we go to the network with information? And something Mark has made very clear to me over the years is, farmers are the ones figuring this stuff out. They're the ones doing the work. What do we have to offer them? But right now the question is, what do you learn from hearing from them?
Chris, did you want to respond?
I think like Mark and the prior speaker demonstrated, like every farm has like its unique circumstances. And I think, understanding the range of those different conditions that they're going to encounter, like not everybody farms the same way. Their soils are slightly different. They have different maybe pests they're dealing with, or different types of plumbing, or ways that they manage things. And so I think hearing from a diversity of farmers so that they can relate kind of the things on the ground that they're dealing with. So when we think about doing these projects, it's in the context of maybe those, opportunities and limitations that, each individual farm faces. Because it's easy to, in concept, just say, oh yeah, put all that water over there. But there's a reality to it that I think is only really understood at that farm level.
Anyone else wants to jump into this conversation thread, just go for it. Just going to give this question another couple seconds, and then Annette posts another great question in the chat for us to consider, and one from Chris as well.
I think it's also really useful to get feedback on tools that are developed, right? Like Mark talks about SAGB not really being accurate. And so even just knowing at what scale those tools are kind of accurate and like where there are data gaps. Yeah, and how that can be improved, I think, for government could be useful in like making sure it's engaging.
Yeah, we talked to Ned about SAGB, we talked about the helicopter thing that's going over. And those are all great tools, but they need to be, tested. And so if we can test the SAGB maps, all we'll do is make them better. And with everything that's going on. And the way you test it is to have a program that encourages farmers to try this out as a management practice. You get the money, not the money, but the ability to see how it will benefit them to bring back that shallow aquifer, which are huge. And a lot of times that's missing in the conversation. How do you get the expenses paid for back later? As far as reaching out to farmers, we, with sustainable conservation, use the RCD in this area. And I thought that was a good synergy because farmers either don't know about the RCD or they're not mad at the RCD and they're not mad at the NRCS. All the other government people that come in, they're kind of worried about, and if they're doing a big project, they're thinking, am I going to get in trouble? So it's nice to work with some organizations that farmers feel comfortable with, and water districts that feel pretty comfortable with, and like I say, the NRCS. So those are good synergies there. But Christine was right. I mean, a lot of farmers just aren't trusting right now, and but more farmers are getting on the bandwagon. From 2017 to 2023, there was probably a 5-fold increase of farmers that were trying recharge, and so that's encouraging. And there's some very big recharge areas in our area too, not 1,000 acres, but 500 acres more, and more are coming online that farmers are doing. So it's building steam. It's a good story to tell.
You will put your question to the group, Annette. How would you like to see local and state governments engage with farmers? Are there any channels or means you would recommend or strategies that do or don't work?
Well, I'll just hop in. I'm Wendy Rash. I'm with the NRCS, and we did the pilot program. We worked with Mark as one of our participants on the pilot program for recharge. And we did offer some funding to help implement groundwater recharge. And I would say, the question on scale, and then sort of the recognition of the granularity that you really have to engage with for these projects to be successful. It's really, you're really walking a line there. I mean, there was a question earlier about, a large 1,000+ acre LunchMAR project, and that scares the living bejesus out of me. I mean, we had 14 projects and a total of about 3,000 acres enrolled in the 22 to 23 year, and that was a lot to manage. So I'm thinking, just the amount of detail that would go into a project of that size is a little frightening. But in terms of engagement, I mean, we use SAGB, we use Land IQ as a broad site selection tool, and I agree it's not accurate at small scales, right? But it is a really good tool for screening out possible sites or screening in possible sites. And if you have individual land-based information like, oh, we broke the hard pan here, then you reevaluate basically. But those tools are really good for getting a general idea of where good projects can go. So I would not throw that baby out with the bathwater. And also just the on-farm planning that goes into these projects to make them successful in terms of understanding how to set up the field, understanding where the water is coming from, understanding how you're going to measure how much water is going out on each field, right? Because each turnout might serve several fields. And so then how do you really understand where the water went, and how much water was actually effectively recharged? And we're getting into questions of, what's the effectiveness of how much water do you need to put on for this to be a recharge event and not an irrigation event? So there really is a lot of detail to work out before we really understand success, I guess, on these recharge projects. But I think we learned a ton through this pilot program with the help of sustainable conservation on the ground, and the growers too, just the feedback and interacting with them as the projects went on. And coordination with the districts is key, because we have to make sure the water can be delivered too. And so that's another lesson learned, is like really understanding the plumbing, both on the farm scale and on the district scale.
And so just to confirm, Wendy, you don't know of any very large scale 100 or 1,000 acre plus FloodMAR projects in the Central Valley?
Not in our program. Our program was pretty limited in geographic area. We did have one grower who had like 1,000 acres of fields enrolled, but they were not all in one place. And yeah, that was a lot.
I think it's important to say that there's very few fields of 1,000 acres that are managed as a 1,000 acre block. So it's recharge is always going to be managed at whatever the field scale is that the farmer manages for irrigation purposes and crop, mix. So there were certainly thousands of acres flooded this year down in the Tulare Basin, but it wasn't managed aquifer recharge.
We wouldn't choose to put dairies underwater if we had the choice.
Right.
Can't imagine why not.
Chris, was there a reason you were asking about that large scale?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to, understand the kind of, it was good to hear from Wendy about, kind of the logistics and, maybe the work to be done to scale up to a level that would meet some of the, state water goals for recharge. If we're looking at getting 400,000 acre feet a year more for the next 5 years, like how does that actually happen? And just thinking about it in that context.
Yeah, I think there's really a role for basins too. The FloodMAR is fantastic, but basins put more water in per acre than the FloodMAR does. We built one basin our first year. We're hoping to build some more this year. But the amount that was put down on that 18-acre footprint of that one basin was huge. And so I think there's a role for that as well. And Mark mentioned something about, sort of a quasi easement on land that's taken out of production to dedicate towards recharge. And I think on-farm basins could really contribute to that. I know districts are doing larger basins, sort of on a regional scale, really, really large ones, but I think there's a role for smaller basins in farm situations as well.
Can I just offer a clarification of terminology here, that FloodMAR is the broader effort of taking flood water and finding places to recharge it. And then we have AgMAR, or on-farm recharge, which is the actual farms. Basins being recharge basins, both district and private land basins are another form of recharge. But the FloodMAR is the big picture of what this whole network is working on, to understand water availability, reservoir management, and where can we put that water across the landscape. And what I think districts are finding is that it makes sense to build recharge basins for sort of average wet years. But for the really extreme years, we wouldn't want to construct that many basins across the landscape, because they'd sit empty for 10 years. And that's really where the farmland recharge becomes a really valuable tool to divert, those peak flood events off and find enough land. And to your question, Chris, then it really is about coordination amongst the irrigation districts to have farmers ready to take that water in those extreme years like last year. And Aaron's talk at the forum was a really good example of how he had prepared and had an incentive in place, different from what Mark's talking about in cash incentive. There, they gave the growers a pumping credit in the future dry years, and that was enough to get several hundred, fields recharged at thousands of acres.
I think hearing more about the incentives would be helpful. Mark talked about the different pricing structures based on, time of use or what availability or something, but is there work being kind of, tested it or piloted out there on different incentives to get folks, that are in Mark's situation to say, yeah, that makes sense for me now?
So far, one thing we've done is did an inventory of districts in the San Joaquin Valley to see what kind of incentives they're using. And they were quite varied from, as I mentioned, down in Tulare Irrigation District, it was a pumping incentive. Later, others do cash and various combinations of reduced water costs. And then, of course, there's the NRCS incentive programs. So I think right now we're just trying to get a handle on what's the menu out there, and then understand, which ones work where. And there seems to be this sort of cultural preference. As you go from the south part of the valley toward further north, there's a lot of interest and understanding of water banking concepts in the south because they've used water banks for so long, that water credit is more the exchange media. As you go north, it's more about cash payments or reduced cost. That's what we're seeing so far, but I don't think those have to be exclusive. I think, it really is a menu of options. I'll put a link in here to that survey.
Yeah, Daniel, I'm going to be going to a multi-purpose land meeting next week.
Mm-hmm.
In Chowchilla Water District, it's a 70,000 acre district. If 5% of the land was taken out of production, that's 3,500 acres. And 5% isn't that much land to take out of production on a farm. So the problem is with credits is if you have a limited amount of surface water, who do you give the surface water to? It might be easier for the district to send it this way or that way, so they have, less channel loss or less problems with maintenance. So that's why I'm kind of a fan on land payment, at least to start with, to get people going on this. Sometimes we want to figure out the solution before we start, but sometimes you have to start before you find the right solution. And so an easy way to do it is say, okay, for 5 acres, we're going to pay you X number of dollars. Is that worth it? Because again, the district is going to be in a tough spot if there's a limited amount of excess water. Who are they going to give it to? Are they going to be winners and losers?
And that's where sometimes using SAGB or other ranking systems are being developed to figure out, where can you do the most recharge on the least acreage, where you have the best conditions. I know that some of the districts we've talked to have said, they need an objective measure like that, Mark, because otherwise it looks like preferential, allocations to one farmer versus another. Yeah, but what would you think, Mark? What would be a way to?
I think if you have a credit system, let's say not a year like last year, but maybe a year like 2019, where the water didn't run that long, and the district's giving credits for water delivered, the district's going to be in a little bit of trouble because I might have the same SAGME rating as you, but you're closer to the outlet, and you get the water.
Right.
And so that's where it's a little bit more fair to say, okay, for X number of dollars per acre, we want to pull out 3,500 acres into Chowchilla Water District. We'll manage it. We'll put the hedgerows on it. We'll have the 60-foot barriers, no pesticides, no herbicides. And it's just a management practice. Part of bringing the pheasants back, it's just another way of farming. That's the trouble I have with credit. So.
Still so much to unpack. Well, a little bit more for our, at least our incentives action team to keep thinking through, and a couple members of the networks coordinating team to think through when we're talking about what's coming up next year. But we're just about at time, and I hope everyone enjoyed those videos. The plan is in a couple months from now to post the rest of the talks from the forum event to our LunchMAR hub, but it's going to take a while to parse them out and build out the web page, but that'll be up there sometime in the new year. And I really appreciate everyone joining today. If I don't see you before then, Happy New Year. It's the first time I'm saying it. It's official. We're coming at the end of the calendar year. Thanks, everyone. Good to see you. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
You too.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Megan.
Bye.